When you say nation, you talk about land. Our land is Africa. That's undeniable. This land is not our land.
That what Frantz Fanon's theory, psychological theory, is that we're in a post-colonial psychology. And what he calls that is an auto-destructional stage, which is the oppressor will oppress for so long that the oppressed no longer have to be physically oppressed. They do it to themselves automatically.
I'm black. Do you hear me, man? Do you understand? I am black. I'm a nigga. You understand me? I was born black, I live black, and I'm gonna die probably because I'm black. Because some cracker that knows I'm black better than you, nigga, is probably gonna put a bullet in the back of my head.
Hey man, it's like this, man. It's like, you know, it's like it's revolution time, man. There's no questions asked. Revolution is here. You know what I'm saying? We the youth, we the young. It's time for us to break loose, you know? We don't have no freedom, no rights, man. We slaves right now. Everybody's still a slave. That's what they told us today. In other words, you still a slave. No matter how much money you got, you still ain't shit. So, you know, it's on, just like that. Just like
are really ready and willing to pay the price that is necessary for freedom. Our people will always be walking around here second-class citizens, or what you call 20th century slaves.
What price are you talking about, sir?
The price of freedom is death.
What's the figure?
I mean, what are you in this for? You want power, you want revenge, you know? What is it?
It's simple, Willie. I just want to be free.
Peace to the family. Peace to the family. I'm Ikemba Ojore. I'm here with another We Charge Colonialism podcast. And today we're going to be speaking on, a very, very hot topic, I guess you can say. A lot of people have been speaking on what's taking place in Palestine, Israel and Palestine, the Israeli and Palestinian conflict that's going on. So, I want to touch on it, but may not spend a whole lot. I know so many people are talking about this topic, but I think it's important that us at We Charge Colonialism, we put out our position on this particular situation. And we as African people who are fighting against the colonizers, against colonialism, have to recognize other people who are being colonized. And this isn't a conversation. We can't get into like feelings and, some people want to get into, who likes who and so forth. But I think like coming from a position of, a humane position, looking at things just as human beings. First, we have to see what's taking place in Israel as unjust, as, barbaric, and understanding what's taking place in Israel. And look, like when you look at what's taking place there and you look at how the colonizers everywhere else are responding to it, I think, it gives us an indication on what the colonizers are willing to do to maintain their position of power when it comes to African people. What happens when we're in the position where we resist against colonialism in a way that sort of, we hurt the colonizer in some form or fashion, whether politically, economically, or physically? How will they respond, right? And so the West is showing restraint when it comes to Israel because they know that if they're in the same position, they wouldn't want anyone to prevent them from doing what they need to do to maintain their position. Dr. Emerson Wilson, in his blueprint for Black Power, what does he say? He says, we must be ever conscious of the fact that the establishment, whatever rewards it gives us, will also, if necessary to maintain its control, kill us. Right? And Israel is showing that. And I think it's a reflection of the mentality of the colonizer throughout the world. So, we have to align ourselves with people who are resisting against settler colonialism, period. So I do want to get into this particular article that talks about the ethnic cleansing that's about to take place in Gaza. But before I do that, I just want to also also inform everyone on what's taking place in Boston this coming November. There's going to be did I pull it up? I didn't even pull it up. But the Malcolm X Symposium, which is taking place in Boston on November 10th. I'm going to put the link to the Eventbrite page for people to register. It's the 60th anniversary of Malcolm X's message to the grassroots speech. I didn't even have this pulled up. Have everything else pulled up. Doing a lot. So I'm going to put the link to this in the chat, but let me share my screen for a second. All right, here we go. So again, I'm going to be promoting this probably on every podcast that I do, just to make sure that the word gets out there. Malcolm X Symposium, honoring the 60-year anniversary of the message to the grassroots speech. And Malcolm X, of course, like he is someone who is considered the ideological father of the Black Power movement. And when we look at the movement that took place in the mid to late 60s that went over into the 70s and continues to this day, it was directly influenced by the teachings of Malcolm X. And of course, Malcolm X, he had his influences, right? From Elijah Muhammad, DeMarcus Garvey, and others. But Malcolm X, he was someone who was able to touch a new generation of activists, revolutionaries. And this particular speech really activated people at that time. And I think it transcends time because I was influenced by this speech, right? 20 years ago when I heard it for the first time, something like that. Maybe a little less than, about 20 years ago when I heard it for the first time, right? So this particular speech is still having an impact on people on future, and will have an impact on future generations, right? But this is happening in Boston at MIT, Malcolm X Symposium, honoring 60 years of the message to the grassroots speech. So you can register here. I'm going to put the link in the chat. So if you want to get more information about it, you can go right there. Boom, boom, put that there. All right. And peace to everybody that's here. This is We Charge Colonialism. I'm Kimba Jordan. If this is your first time being here, make sure you subscribe and make sure you like and share as well. So let's get into this particular article. This whole situation is really, I've been waiting to speak to what has been happening, but I knew that there was going to be a lot of people talking about it. So there was a moment where I was not going to speak on it, but then I think everybody needs to play their part in talking about this issue and spreading the word. What's happening in Israel? This particular article is talking about the evacuation that was mandated. This mandate that was put out by Israel. Netanyahu told 1 million Palestinians they had 24 hours to evacuate. What is that? What is that if not ethnic cleansing? And this is an article written by Sarah Helm. And when we talk about ethnic cleansing, African people, we have a lot of experience with ethnic cleansing, and I don't care if it's put in a way or characterized as gentrification, right? Because gentrification, that's all gentrification is. And we see in the United States of America plenty of communities that are quote unquote being gentrified, right? Which is supposed to be a revitalization of communities. But this revitalization of these communities come with an influx of colonizers who are coming into these communities, and making it a lot more difficult for the population that resides there to live. And not that it's already not difficult because of the poverty that exists there, but the economy doesn't get any better for those people who live there. If anything, it gets a lot more difficult for them to survive in these communities, and they end up having to move out of these communities to places that may be a lot less expensive. That's less expensive to live than in those communities because of how the prices, the cost of living begins to rise. And so, this is just a strategy to wipe out the people who live in these communities. This is ethnic cleansing. So whether it's done in a violent way or done in a more strategic way, ethnic cleansing is ethnic cleansing at the end of the day. This is a quote by someone: "I will not move. I will be killed in my house with my family," one mother told me. "Look to history and the omens are grim." Let me read some of this. The Israeli governments demand that more than 1 million Palestinians leave their homes in northern Gaza and flee south, has horrific echoes of the past. I worked as a journalist in the regions in the 1990s, and in recent years, I have spent a great deal of time in Gaza and Israel, researching the history of Gaza's 2.3 million refugees. And you see, I like how she categorized these people as refugees, like how she describes them as refugees, because that's what these 2.3 million people are who live in this area in the Gaza Strip. And that's a population that is higher, 2.3 million. That's more than the population of the city I live in, which is Philadelphia, right? We have a population of less than 2 million people. So maybe it's a population of Philadelphia. I think about it. Yeah, our population is 1.5 million. So when you go back to this, so you're looking at a population it's bigger than a lot of American cities, right? But this is a population who's refugees. And why are they refugees? You have to go back to 1948. So almost everyone in Gaza is a refugee from one of 200 Arab villages then in southern Palestine that were destroyed by Israeli forces in 1948 when the Jewish state came into being. What remains of some of these villages lies within 10 miles of the Gaza boundary. Some refugees can even see their land through the fence, right? So when you go back historically, this is something we have seen before, the Palestinians being pushed off of their land and not able to return to that land, right? So, when we look at this, like the pretext that is used for the Palestinians, for telling the Palestinians to leave those areas is because there's going to be a ground offense and they don't want civilians to be caught in, crossfire, to be killed in this ground offensive, this ground offensive that they plan to do. So, but we know what's going to happen, right? And they're saying when it's over, they'll be able to return. But we know once they are removed from that area, there's not going to be any timetable for a return, right? And so they're being further and further pushed into the sea. That's what's taking place. The first phase, and so also, I guess I'll touch on this in a minute, but when you think about the Palestinians' response or their actions towards the Israelis, this is a response to the colonial conditions that they live in. See, we look at how Hamas had attacked Israel, right? And some people will say, well, they started, but they shouldn't attack Israel. This is a place where close to 50% of the population is unemployed, I believe. Like a little less, somewhere around 46, somewhere around those numbers, like people who are not working that live in this area. These are people, a large percentage of people who are living impoverished who are being marginalized by the Israeli state. And these are the conditions that they're living in, right? So they were a powder keg waiting to blow. However, just going to go on. The first phase of Israel's revenge for Hamas atrocities, the intense aerial bombardment of the past few days, was easy to predict. Every innocent Palestinian in Gaza was bound to pay the appalling price, and thousands already have. However, I did not predict that this time the West would not only let it happen, as it has several times before, but cheer Israel on, sending arms and effectively promising impunity from international law, abounding the Palestinians to their plight. The reason probably this correspondent was surprised is because she's a member of the colonizers, like, and I mean, as far as her biological or racial, makeup, that's, so she's kind of seeing the world through that lens. Because I'm gonna be honest, like, I'm not surprised. Anybody who understand the mentality of the colonizers wouldn't be surprised on the actions of Israel and the support that they were going to get from other colonizers. Now, you'll see colonizers, and I'm talking about Europeans and Euro-Americans, you'll see them begin to push back against Israel's policies or their actions against the Palestinians because of the forces on the ground in those respective states pushing against the state and their support, right? So because of political expediency, it's around election time as well. Like, people are going to make decisions based off of they're going to respond to the voices of the people. They're going to respond to what the masses are doing. So as long as people are continuing to protest, right, and demand that their governments not support the actions of Israel, then you'll see the colonized states begin to back off, right? But as you can see, the initial response to it all, they were in full support, and they're still slow to move in regards to their actions, right? So with the green light from Israel allies, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared on Friday that 1 million Gazans were to be evacuated from the north to the south of Gaza. Netanyahu wants us to believe his prime concern is to keep civilians out of danger during the expected ground invasion from the north, which is presumably how he plans to finally crush Hamas. Such empty claims at the time of writing, 1,800 Palestinians have already been killed, are made in the hope of immunizing Israel against accusations of war crimes. Driving 1 million people south will cause ever more horror, and we all know by now that that there is no safe place for civilians to flee to or to shelter. Right? I think I want to pull a map up of Gaza. I'm going to scroll down here. If Netanyahu, I'm struggling with his name, continues with his evacuation plan, history and events on the ground tell us that after the warnings and bombings we are already seeing, the refugees will flee as they did in 1948. One potential exit for them is into Egypt. Although Egypt is strongly opposed to accepting refugees, knowing it would be collaborating in permanent ethnic cleansing, right? I get that, right? Because now it's like, oh, okay, they have a place to go. So, we don't have to rush to bring them back. Again, there will be another excuse to continue to occupy these areas. And we've seen it in the West Bank, or we're seeing it in the West Bank now, this occupation. This could change if the humanitarian crisis at its borders escalates. If Gazans do indeed flood over into the Sinai, they may not be allowed back. See, the risk for Netanyahu are huge, not least because of the Israeli hostages inside Gaza. But given that his political future looks almost certainly over anyway, he may calculate that he has nothing to lose. And the Israeli right has long pressed for expelling Gaza population into the Sinai. So let me scroll down to the bottom of this. As with Israel's expulsions in 1948, today's leadership will then project the narrative saying that there is no safe future for Israel unless the entire population of Gaza is permanently expelled, right? Ethnic cleansing, genocide. This is what they're talking about. Negotiation will then begin about whether the refugees have a right to return to Gaza, which was already a place of exile. This scenario may sound overly apocalyptic, but as Palestinian refugees know only too well, it is not. Israel has long hoped that the story of its ethnic cleansing of Palestinian villages of 1948 would be forgotten. From the first days of the 1948 flight, Israel devised its own narrative of those events, claiming that Palestinians fled under orders of the Arab leadership. When they tried to return to their villages after the war, they were labeled infiltrators and then terrorists. Since Israel and Egypt blockaded Gaza in 2006-7, cutting it off from the world, Israel has seen reason to hope that the story of 1948 would remain hidden too. Archives have been blocked and the last remains of villages destroyed. But many Gazans today not only remember 1948, but feel as if they are back in it. So I'm gonna stop there. I'm going to share something else, but like this is when you have to understand the history too of what's taking place there in Israel to better understand why the Palestinians are reacting the way that they're reacting. It's they're in continued conditions of oppression and exploitation. The exploitation that is taking place and the oppression that is taking place in Palestine is going to come. There's always going to be some sort of resistance to that. There should be resistance to settler colonialism. And we look at how the huge influx of Jews came into this country after World War II. And but there was decades, when you get into the history, even prior to that, there was decades of claiming lands within the Palestinian territory before the Jewish state was founded in what was that, 1948. Prior to that, that kind of like set up what took place in 1948, because then there's this contention over who controls the land. So there is a part where you have people who are in positions of leadership who were selling land, right? But after the war, there was this assault, though. There was this assault that took place on the Palestinian people, and lands were taken, was never given back, even though that there was a UN resolution that said that the Israelis had to return that land. The Israelis ignored it, right? They ignored that. And so the Palestinians, even after the conflict and war, was never able to require the lands that was rightfully theirs, right? And so this is where we get into this occupation, settler colonial state. But also, like on the other side, so we have was taking place in Gaza, and I actually want to pull up a map of let me see if I can, because there's things happening also on in the West Bank that won't be, at least right now, it's not getting a lot of attention, right? And what's happening in Gaza is definitely not a distraction. That's a serious event, but we can be distracted from try to pull this up. We can be distracted from all of the other horrors that are taking place. Man, let me see. All right, I'm gonna just have to do it like this. Do it like this. Okay. Distracted from all the other horrors that are taking place in Palestine. So I'm gonna share my screen, share this map. Boom. And let me see if I'm trying to pull it. Let me see if y'all can see this map. Yeah, I guess y'all can see it okay. because right now I can't get it any bigger. But if you look at this map, look at my cursor. Hopefully you can see it well. I know it may be a little small for you, but you see Gaza. Gaza is this area right here. And the West Bank is over here. So you see Israel is controlling all of this territory. Actually, it controls all of this territory, be honest, in some fashion, because the Palestinians is sort of, they're living under Israel occupation and rule. So it's difficult, even though there's this representation that you can say that the Palestinians have. They do have their leaders and so forth, but in regards to their ability to operate like an independent state, and even I think the UN has recognized them, but they really don't have the ability to operate as an independent state, right? Their power is limited by the Israeli government. But if you look at Gaza, you have 2.3 million people who live in this area right here. And they say, like in the northern part of Gaza, 1.3 million, where 1.3 million people reside, they want them to evacuate this area, right? And go south. And when you think about that amount of people, I'm just want to put it in proper perspective. But before I go there, you see the West Bank right here. So there's also there's some atrocities happening that the Israelis are committing against the Palestinians in the West Bank as a response to what Hamas had did over here, where the Gaza Strip is located. So there's like these vigilantes, there's people going out and they're just murdering Palestinians indiscriminately. And I'm gonna talk about that in a second. But before I go there, just want to look at, so think about 1.3 million people are being asked to evacuate. And I want to put that in perspective. So if you look at the population of, some of the cities in the United States, hold on. Oh, stop. Hold on. Okay. If you look at the populations here, so look at the part 1.3 million. So just think about like Phoenix population is 1.6, Philadelphia is 1.5, San Antonio is 1.4, San Diego is 1.3, Dallas 1.2. Just think if the populations of these cities, the total population of these cities was told to evacuate in 24 hours, right? Like, put that in perspective. Like, if the whole population right here in Philadelphia, we was told, hey, we better get out of here in 24 hours because it's going to be a ground invasion. It's going to be bombs that's going to be dropped on the cities. Like, there will be straight chaos, man. Like, it's impossible for that to happen. And just think about what would you do if you had to get up and just leave your homes, right? And leave everything behind and not knowing when you're able to return. Like, where would you go? And we all probably have family members outside of cities, states, but how many of us have family members outside of the places where we reside in general? Most people, like close family members that they can go to when things are rough, live in the same city that they live in, right? And so, just think about what that would mean to those people who would have to leave those areas. So the last thing I wanted to pull up is, again, like what's happening in the West Bank. Again, peace to the family too. Appreciate everybody who hopping in and out. Make sure you like and share as well, so we can get more people subscribed to the channel. And I will be back here tomorrow looking at what's taking place in Darfur, because again, we need to not just have our focus on what's happening in one area and not understand that these things are happening globally. And when we go to Sudan, there's a genocide that's taking place in Sudan that needs to gain more attention, right? And so when we have African people who are experiencing genocide and ethnic cleansing, and no one, I think, over the last 500 years has experienced that more than African people. Let me not say that. Let me not say that because, you have the Tasmanians, and you have, the people, Aboriginals of Australia, and of course the indigenous people of the Americas, right? So I won't, say that no one, but that's the nature of colonialism. How all 9 Europeans had to go through this sort of Holocaust that needs to be called out. So let me share. I'm gonna go to Palestinian, what's taking place in the West Bank, and again, I think like it's important for us to acknowledge what's taking place in Palestine, because African people are facing this same sort of brutality, have been facing it, and continues to face it. And when the time comes, people, when we're looking for support for our resistance to colonialism, our fight for nationhood, we should be looking for support from other oppressed people, right? To get behind, our fight for liberation. And so, if we're looking for the support of others, then, we have to be willing to support other oppressed and colonized people around the world. And sometimes it's not a matter, again, sometimes it's not a matter of, who likes who and so forth. Sometimes it's about strategy. Sometimes it's politics. Well, politics is always at the center of these discussions, right? Resources and so forth, right? So, everybody that we support and align ourselves with doesn't necessarily have to be because we like these people, right? Have some sort of emotional detachment to it, right? Because we can go anywhere around the world. We can go on the African continent and find Africans who don't like other Africans. We can come to the United States and find Africans who don't like other Africans, right? But at the end of the day, I think it's a struggle for liberation. African people who have the mindset of wanting to end colonialism have to organize and come together. And sometimes we have to find allies in unlikely places. Some people, may not like that, but the struggle for African liberation, everyone won't be on the same page, right? But as long as we have the same objective of liberating African people, we have to find a way to work together. So with that being said, though, this, again, I had touched on this, at least 16 Palestinians killed by Israeli forces in the West Bank. Death toll rises to 51 in the occupied West Bank since Hamas launched attack on Israel on October 7th. So at least 16 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, amid protests against the continuing Israeli bombardment of the besieged Gaza Strip. Protests were held in cities across the Israeli-occupied territory on Friday, including Ramallah, Tokarim, Nablus, and Hebron, hours after Israel ordered residents in northern Gaza to evacuate their homes ahead of an expected ground invasion. The AP News Agency reported that at least 3 people were killed in the town of Tokarim, and a 14-year-old boy was killed in Bet Farik near Nablus. The news outlet DPA reported that Israeli settlers alongside soldiers took part in some confrontations with Palestinian protesters. At least 51 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank since October 7th, the health ministry said on Saturday. And I've seen a video. I wasn't thinking about showing this video prior to prior to doing this, since I don't have it queued up, I won't go to it, but I was watching a video of a protest when a Israeli walked up to a Palestinian and shot him like right on the spot. Like there was a struggle. Like he walked up to him with the gun, and I think he attempted to hit him with the gun. The guy grabbed the gun, right, and it was a struggle. And he kind of the Israeli like backed away from him, pointed the gun at him, and shot him, right. And this is what's happening in the West Bank, right? These atrocities. And so this is going to boil over. You see people in Jordan, Hezbollah, from that's in Lebanon. They are talking about entering this conflict. This thing could like spiral out of control. I mean, it already has, but I think that things, things may get a lot worse before they get better, unfortunately. So, this is happening in the West Bank. And if you remember the map I showed, that's on the other side. And so the West Bank, they weren't even involved in the attack that took place, at least directly. At least directly. I won't, get into whatever conversations or organizing that took place, right? But these are people who are also beginning to feel the backlash from the Israelis as a result of the Hamas attack. So the last thing I want to show is Julius Malema. His response to everything that is taking place, and Conrad always be on point. But let me show this. And this is the South African president position. I'm sorry, Prime Minister's position.
Transgender. It's made very, very cool through the media.
There won't be an Israeli embassy under the EFF until human rights are respected in Palestine. We are beneficiaries of international solidarity. We will not allow any of the teams, any of our people, to go and participate in sporting activities or festivals or anything of that sort in Israel that is stolen and continues to kill and oppress the people of Palestine. So we're not downsizing. We're going to withdraw our embassy from Israel, and we're going to chase away the Israeli embassy in South Africa. If we can't do that, then our solidarity with the Palestinians is a lip service. We need action, and not only with regard to embassy and cultural activities, including economic activities. We ought to cut ties with Israel. There won't be an Israeli embassy under the EFF until human rights are respected in Palestine. We are beneficiaries of international solidarity. We will not allow any of the teams, any of our people, to go and participate in sporting activities or festivals or any of the...
All right. So yeah, that was Julius Malema. And there's clips of Prime Minister also of South Africa also uniting with the support of supporting the Palestinians. I just think that African people have to, if anything, we should be doing this wherever we are in the U.S., where I'm based. Anybody that's supporting Israel need to, whatever politicians, whatever corporations. And I think strategically, this is a smart move strategically, because we shouldn't be supporting these institutions anyway. And so we should be looking for any excuse to organize people to not support colonialism that's taking place there, but also the colonialism that's taking place in the U.S., in Africa, and in other places in the diaspora. So again, like, this is an opportunity. We have to look at and not to sound like opportunists, but again, like we have to look at this as an opportunity to push forward our own, as African people, our own struggle for liberation, to overturn our own contradiction with colonialism wherever we are. And so if we have to think about it, just think about when George Floyd, when he was killed, and when there's any atrocities that take place against African people in America, and when we uplift that and the world gets behind it, other groups, they use it as an opportunity to push forward their own struggles to overturn their personal contradictions, right? And so we have to also look at it in that way. But definitely, man, we have to say free Palestine, stop what's taking place in Israel, into settler colonialism. We charge colonialism, all day. So I want to appreciate everybody that tapped in. Again, we'll be back, or I'll be back tomorrow at 9 to discuss what's taking place in Darfur, because, Africans, we are dealing with this. We've been dealing with this for a long time. And, we can't also, in this moment, we can't forget about the oppression and exploitation that's taking place as it pertains to African people. So tap in tomorrow at 9 o'clock as I talk about that. And also at 1 o'clock, Frank is going to be on, and he's on at 1 p.m. So tap in and check out Frank, my comrade, at 1 p.m. As he's going to be, Frank usually is discussing a lot of things, but a lot of topics, man. He's going to go for about 4 hours. But tomorrow, he's going to be touching on the U.S. might end up being an outcast in Eden land, Africa. Outside laugh, Frank be going in, man. So tomorrow, tap in at 1 p.m. And again, I'm back at 9 p.m. Appreciate you all for joining the discussion. And remember to subscribe if this is your first time. And the link that I have in the chat, again, that's for the Malcolm X Symposium, the 60-year anniversary of Malcolm's message to the grassroots speech. At the symposium, there's going to be a focus on Malcolm's time incarcerated. And so Boston is a fitting place for this conversation, this dialogue to take place, because Malcolm X, that's where he spent his time incarcerated in Massachusetts. So make sure you register for that. Appreciate you again for tapping in. And until next time, peace and power.